Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. It is so thrilling to be here with our guest, Emily Holgan. And I wanted to make sure to first introduce myself. My name is Maribel Alleman. I am an executive coach and co-founder of Group Coaching HQ. And our mission is really to help group coaches craft their mastery and make sure they have all of the right tools to have wonderful and create wonderful group experiences for their clients. And again, super excited to have you with us, Emily. Let me toss it over to Dom to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dominique Mas. I am the other co-founder of Group Coaching HQ. Really excited to be here today. And our guest today for our GCHQ conversation is Emily Golden. Emily is the founder of Golden Resources. She is a master certified coach who specializes in executive leadership, team and career coaching. She brings 17 years of corporate human resources experience in the chemical manufacturing and financial services, where she's specialized in talent management and recruitment. She is also the author of a wonderful book, but I'll let her tell us more about that. Emily, welcome to this conversation. Anything that we left out and you'd like to talk about?
Well, thanks so much for having me. I think you pretty much summarized it. The one piece that you didn't mention, which I didn't put in my bio, is that I was a burnt out corporate leader, and that has really informed much of the work that I'm doing in the world today. So
thank you.
I'm so thrilled to be here.
An important piece, especially with regards to your book. So we'd love to first ask you, actually, you always talk about the new golden rule. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, sure. So we all know the golden rule, and there's nothing wrong with the golden rule to treat others the way that we want to be treated. And I, in my work, have actually found that with the high performing professionals that I've worked with and people who are striving for greatness consistently, that there's a message that is not being received. And that is the new golden rule, which is to treat yourself the way you want others to treat you. So what I have found is that often people are not, especially again, these high performing individuals that I get to work with, they're not treating themselves with much kindness. They're not talking very nicely to themselves. They're certainly not treating themselves the way that they would treat a friend. And that's a huge problem. It's a much larger problem than it even looks like on the surface. And as someone who has kind of come full circle in terms of the way I treat myself, I can speak to this with so much love and compassion. And I can only have love and compassion truly, truly for the other person because I now have it for myself.
Thank you for sharing that. Actually, as you say that, it reminds me of a lot of our trainees who are quite new to coaching, coming in and are putting an enormous amount of pressure on themselves. And I'm sure you see that too. I know you're a mental coach. I'm sure you see that as well. So I wonder if you have, perhaps before we dive into communities and how they helped you, the one piece of advice that you like to give people on how to make sure that they do treat themselves the way that they would like others to treat them.
Yeah. So it's a great question, and I can so resonate with the level of pressure that a new coach or someone who's seasoned puts on themselves to perform and do the job really well. What I will say is that it's who you be, it's who you be, not what you do, that causes the transformation and the shift for the person on the other side. Energy follows energy. If you are doubting yourself and putting and trying to dress yourself up to look a certain way or come across a certain way, because ultimately inside you're not feeling so good about you, or you're doubting yourself, it comes across, and it may come across in like subtle ways, but it absolutely comes across.
So what's maybe a practice that coaches could do, especially, that moment you're logging on and things are happening, the world's revolving around you and the doubt comes in, especially for like Dom was mentioning, the newer coaches, this is, ooh, let me go through all of my tools and things like that. So what might be a quick practice that they could try out to tap into that self-compassion?
So it's a great question. And what I will say is, you have to understand, I am not a religious person. And through my experience as a coach, I've become incredibly spiritual. So one of the things, and I resonate with God as spirit. So for me, it's when I notice my heart is racing, I notice the sweaty palms, I notice where's my tool? What am I going to be leaning on today? I'm going to give it up to God. I'm going to trust in God. And it's so simple. And yet it really has us, it has me personally, I can say, leaning into something greater than myself so that I can take some of that pressure off of me. And that's just a quick thing in the moment. As far as other practices leading up to a group coaching session, I am big into oracle cards. So if I'm feeling particularly off kilter, right, I'll pull out a deck of oracle cards. And it's kind of a joke in my family because like everyone came together on Sunday night to have dinner, and it was like, Mom, can you bring out the oracle cards? I'm feeling a little, stressed about the week. So like I'll pull out the cards. I actually try, and I do it with a whole lot of fun and joy. So I'll really try to bring up that joy, and then I'll say a third thing that has been incredibly instrumental for me in my own transformation is just getting quiet. So just sitting quietly. It could be 5 minutes, it could be 3 minutes, it could be 2 minutes or a minute, but just sitting quietly, listening to my own heartbeat, feeling my own body, my own sensations, and it just bringing me back into my body. So hopefully those are a few things that people can pull on.
Yeah, I would definitely, I think for me, the what has always helped is that pulling into the body and grounding myself, and also being, to use the word I used before, compassionate towards that feeling of anxiety, right? So that you recognize it and you're like, okay, you're there, let's let it go if we can, and then be able to move on. So I think a lot of the coaches probably have practice, may need, could be something to tap into even more. But I am curious, when you talk a lot about communities and belonging to communities, how it has been incredibly helpful for you.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, what do you think it can do for those who are building their group coaching practices?
To be in community,
Mm-hmm.
it's everything. So again, energy follows energy. What I have found is that for myself, when I feel connected to a community and I feel like I belong, it's because I see something in myself in that community. And it may not even be something very conscious, but if you've ever had the experience of feeling really out of place and you kind of take a pull back and think about that experience, it's likely because you don't really see yourself, or you can't really connect to anyone or any kind of dynamic in that group. So being part of community has been incredibly instrumental. And that started for me in my coach training program. And I'm so grateful to have gone through a program called Accomplishment Coaching. And in the very first day of our training, which was a year long, we were introduced to our new team. We didn't have a choice about this team, but we had to create community amongst the team in order to essentially, and this is going to sound dramatic, and I don't really mean it that way, but really to thrive, not to necessarily survive the program, but to thrive in the program. And there were people that I connected with much more deeply, some than others. Those that I didn't connect with deeply, by the way, and this is for all coaches that are in the learning stages or, really, can hold themselves as masters or experts. There's something to learn about the people who you can't connect with. I remember my first coach saying, that person that's irritating you so much, he's your next breakthrough. What is it about him that you can't be with? So this shows up in all communities, right? That there's certain aspects of people and we can learn a lot. But for me, there's 5 people from my coach training program, which was a little over 20 people that are my dearest friends. And they're people I don't necessarily hang out with every weekend. We don't live near each other, but I can call them at any time. And what's really cool is that we've supported each other through all of these years, that I can reach out to any of them and say, remind me who I am, because I'm forgetting. And I have a client who I just noticed I'm putting on a pedestal, about to go into a session, or it's about to do group coaching with a group of people. I'm feeling really intimidated. Will you remind me of who I am? And they immediately know. You are radiance, wisdom, love, wit, right? Like, thank you so much. And so leaning into community that way for me has been incredibly instrumental. And it's something I look forward to when I get to, and I do most of my community work on Zoom. So when I get to spend time with the community that I have cultivated to support me in my work and my practice, I get excited because I know we're going to laugh. I know we may even cry. You know, there's things that we're going to be real with each other.
Thank you so much. I'm wondering, I first of all, I'm with you every step of the way. I think everything you share about being in community. And I think when we first started, you mentioned that feeling of belonging, that feeling of connection, and feeling part of something. And I think that's incredibly powerful, right? We are social animals. we want to be we are wired to be together. My I guess what I'm wondering is, what was a way, so you mentioned your coach training, but what was a way for you to find different or other communities when coach training finished? And I know you're still part of different or of various communities, and I know both Maribel and I are too, and we can talk about those in a second. But yeah, how did you then find, you know, that feeling again and again in different ways?
Well, one thing I want to say is that when I was going through my own growth process, I had this day I woke up and I was like, how come all of the people that were in my community before my own transformation are feeling alien to me? And I just want to put that out there and say, it's not unusual when you have started to do the deep work on yourself to start to feel some disconnection. And I don't have the solution other than I can say over time, as I've learned to love myself more and really have those communities to plug into, it matters less that, you know, the few people that I used to connect with, or my former community, it matters less that I can connect with them deeply because I have those places to connect deeply. So how did I continue to cultivate community? Once I turned on my kind of my awareness, my radar around who are my people, I started to notice who those people were. So it was things like I've had a yoga practice since 2013, and it was like going into the yoga room and noticing energy. And I've actually created a little community amongst my yoga pals. So, and energetically, it's the people that vibe on the same vibration. And, you know, I like to think for me, it's a pretty positive, high vibration frequency. I also have had the opportunity I've been brought into a number of organizations to really cultivate community. And, you know, I think sometimes we are looking really hard. Where are my people? Where's my community? And in corporate environments, community is underutilized, especially in this very fragmented Zoom-like world. And I have this vision, which I'm a little tied up in other areas of my life right now, but I have this vision of really cultivating as many deep communities inside organizations as possible in my lifetime. I think it's such a gorgeous place to build deep, and that is going to require, by the way, that in corporate we are called forth to bring both that professional persona and who we are personally, which is often a missing. So other ways that I have found I love to the point that it bothers my husband, because he's like, what else are you going to study next? I love to jump into training programs. And it's actually more, I've found, for the people that I get to meet and become, connected with, than the content often. So I've been fortunate. I did Dare to Lead training. I just finished a WBEX team coaching training. And I met an amazing cohort of women who, some are in Canada, one's in New Zealand, a few are in the US. We would never know each other otherwise, but we connect. We meet at 8:00 every other Tuesday, 8 p.m. It's the middle of the day for our friend in New Zealand the next day. And we support each other. We train each other on new distinctions, and we bring it all. We bring the truth. Sometimes I'll hear from them, Emily, like, what do you got going on now? You always have a million different things. Slow down, girl. It's like, I need to hear that sometimes. And then, so look, because it's around you. If you're having a hard time finding it, jump into a training program. Obviously your training program, just really be intentional about it. And you'll pick up the pieces as you go.
I love that intentionality, and this idea of belonging is so important, especially when we think about as group coaches. We need to be able to create that space for the participants, right? And create that container. And I'm curious, what are some of the things, what do you see as those elements that make someone feel like they belong, right? And then how do you cultivate that in your work?
I'm fortunate to have a number of groups that I coach right now. And one thing I can say that sets apart our groups, I think, is I train them early in the power of acknowledgement. And it's really the power of being seen and witnessed. And I'm doing this with women. Okay. So these are just the way that these groups are structured. They're all women. But it's to witness as a group this woman. So I start the group coaching process with really identifying, hearing about the person. So we call them, invite them in, tell us kind of the story of your life. And then we bear witness to that individual's gifts. And I will train the group in how to acknowledge who that person is, not what they do. That's great. But we over-index on that in our culture. So it's, who does that person be? And so it's gotten to a point now, I've been working, one of the groups is 3 years in, and then 2 are 2 years in. And it's now to the point where we witness each other from the second we get on the Zoom screen together. And I'll just pass the baton and say, hey, Dom, will you kick off acknowledgements? And we'll do it depending on what the energy is. Often we do it at the end. And sometimes we do it all the way through, or I'll pause and say, let's all acknowledge one another. We're in a real moment. I mean, as group coaches, we have lived through, think about what we have lived through in the past 3 years, what we have borne witness to, how we have the gifts of holding the container. I feel so fortunate, because I actually don't believe that there's anything that can come up in a group now that I won't have some resource to be able to support. Yesterday I was leading a group and a woman shared, she had told me a couple of weeks ago, but she shared with the group, and I know it was really hard, that she lost her brother suddenly, right before Christmas. And there was so much emotion in her space. And we just held her. We were quiet. We looked at her, some of us sent loving, words, comments, we were able to send notes, but just really being able to hold that space cultivates the trust.
Would you mind sharing, you mentioned that you might get someone to start with acknowledgements. Is that like a one sentence for each person, or would you mind sharing your process for that?
Of course. So I train, it's how I was trained. And so I'll train the group at the beginning by acknowledging them. Like, for instance, Dom, I want to acknowledge you for the light that you bring to this space. Today, you're shining so brightly, and there's a warmth about you that I really appreciate. Thanks for being that in this space.
Mm.
So it's not formulaic. I'm really like, I'm with her. If you could feel it, like I'm really, one of the things also that I think is so important when you're acknowledging is like to slow down and really connect, because we could feel it in our body. When I'm acknowledging someone, I can really feel it. And I'll support the individuals in the group if they're having a tough time with acknowledgement. Even if, we've trained on it a bunch of times, it's just not natural, right? We don't do it. So I'll say sometimes if someone's having a particular, challenge with it, next time you're at the store, right? Most of us go to the store, at least we used to. And you're talking to someone, the person who's checking you out, whatever, acknowledge something about who they are. Again, being, not what they're doing.
It's how you're experiencing them, right? So like the warmth and the light, and it's an experience that perhaps you're not processing, and that you need to pause and check in with yourself. Say, what is this that I'm feeling about this individual? And I think that's where the magic of group coaching, you can allow them to do that for each other and then take it back to their worlds.
I mean, that is the power, the magic, the ripple effect, right? And with group coaching, it's not just, I had one person who I coached a couple of years ago, man, very masculine, in his masculine. We worked together for 6 months. And at the end, he had tears in his eyes. And he said, I don't know that you understand. By working with me, I have been able to take our work, and the ripple effects in the organization have been so deep. And everything that I then brought to them, they were able to bring to their people. And with group coaching, it's like multiplied, it's exponential.
Yeah, I love that about, I think that's one of my favorite things about group coaching. I like one-on-one, but I love groups. I just think there is just so much room for impact, and it is magical to watch how, as people, as coaches, evolve and start coaching groups, and they come back to us. Sometimes, some of our trainees have created their own programs, and they've come back to us and they've told us, like, I feel like I'm making so much impact, and it's just beautiful to watch that energy that comes from it.
It's such
go
a
ahead.
gift.
It's
It's such a gift. I was just going to say, like, my closest friends, when I tell them about like a day in the life of work as a coach, they're like, oh, that sounds so rewarding. It's like, it's the height.
It is. So I'm wondering, a lot of our audience, those who join the program, but also those who come to these conversations or listen in later to the recordings, are building their practices, and they're building their group coaching programs. And I'd love for us, and Maribel, feel free to share as well, but for the three of us to share how we've leveraged the communities that we're a part of in order to help build our practices. I think it's always helpful for everyone to hear concrete ways to do that. So I'm going to start, and then I would love for both of you to jump in. But one of the communities that I'm a part of is called Dreamers and Doers. It's a women network of entrepreneurs, and we have asks and offers in the group, and so we'll make some offers. And when I first started coaching and then group coaching, I made offers, and I would do pro bono groups, and I would say, hey, anyone who would love to get group coaching, come and join me at this time. And people would come. And I actually, and this is how I met one of our previous trainees, actually did that in Central Park. This was way back before the pandemic. And I would invite people to come to Central Park, and a group of us would meet 6 to 8, and I would coach them right there in the park, and we'd do a little meditation in the grass, and it was beautiful. And those women, at the time it was women, and those women became my most incredible referring partners, basically, because they'd experienced me, they'd experienced my coaching. They then went and told their friends, hey, if you're looking, they knew who to speak to. So that was one of the ways. And I like to say, in every community, you get what you give, right? And for me, it was through giving that I started to get referrals from that community. So that's one way I wanted to share, but we'd love to hear what else you've done.
Well, it's a sense of generosity, right? So sometimes I've encountered individuals like, oh no, this is mine, and I have to, protect my IP, and yet you're that lack of generosity and not engaging in reciprocity really limits your opportunities. I mean, I do most of my practices in corporate, right? So would love to go to Central Park. But I think for me, the communities has helped me identify emerging needs, emerging challenges, and then creating ideas to then package and sell to corporate clients. So it's really more of the data research and then exchanging ideas and tools, and you get a program big enough, you can't do it by yourself. So now I have a community of coaches, and I'm saying, yeah, you need 35 coaches, got them. I can deliver that, right? So, and that is amazing because through the community, now you have trusted relationships, and you're not worried that like, oh my God, I'm leaving my most important client with you and I don't know you. No, I know you because we've had this experience and we've identified not only tools and practices, but values. Like, I completely align with who you are, who you be, like Emily Golden has been telling us, right? And versus just what you do on your resume.
Oh, such wisdom in this space. So what I can add is, first off, I love, Maribel, that you were talking about generosity, because that's one of my top values. And to me, there is nothing greater in the experience of living my life every day than being generous and being in the face of someone else's generosity. One of the things that I can say very specifically when you are building a coaching practice, lean in and be specific in what you're asking for. So as coaches, and I have seen this before, I think it's an occupational hazard when someone comes to us, it's in our community, we can offer coaching, and what the person is actually looking for is hard and fast advice about, hey, what systems do you use? How do you leverage your online business manager? What do you wish you knew that you don't know now, right? So I think, and I always try to be really sensitive to that. When someone comes to me from my community and they want to pick my brain on something, or they need support around the business, I'm like, do you want a little coaching, or are you really looking for some advice? And of course, caveat, advice, only my experience. I am not the only one, the be all end all. I can tell you how it's worked for me. It's not the right way necessarily, or the wrong way. It's just the way that I can share with you. So be specific in the request. Recognize that you are going to, it might look like, oh, I've had someone said to me recently, how did you build this this business of yours so quickly? Like, it was like an overnight situation. I'm like, no, it was 6 years. It's been 6 years of being super intentional. And if I told you how many times I fell and cried and thought, thought I'm throwing the towel in, or had to do I call it completion work, right? Because I became incomplete almost like at least once a week, right? Like, so we got to be doing our own work and have people in your life who can reflect to you when your flame of possibility is dimming, because without your own flame of possibility and belief that you can create this thing, just forget it, because it's not you have to have that possibility. So I hope those are some useful, like very tactical things that people can do.
You just reminded me, Emily, of, I know he's also a mentor of yours and Maribel too, but you just reminded me of a great article by Rich Ledvin, that's called How to Become an Overnight Success in 36 Years. I just love that. I think you brought up something really, really important here, which is asking for help and how to ask for help. And I think often we might forget that people are not mind readers and they might not know that we actually need help. And you mentioned, making a request that's very clear and that's concise and that's precise. And I think that's a really, really important thing to remember. And I think in addition to that, when reaching out to people in a community, people like to understand why you're asking them. So helping people understand like what makes me ask you as an individual versus anyone else is because I value your opinion, I value your experience. I see that you've done that and I'd like to do something similar. So making sure that people understand that you are asking for help, so being explicit about it, and being precise, and then that they understand what makes you ask them, and also what the impact is of the help on you. How is their help going to help you? And I think that's a really important thing to remember. Everybody likes to know the impact they're making. So, and the last thing I'll say on that is then, I personally so appreciate it when someone reaches out to me for help and they then follow up, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later and say, hey, thanks for your time. This is what happened after we talked. And so if those of you who are listening, and I personally continue to do that when I reach out for help, making sure that you follow up and tell people how they helped you is so important. Maribel, I think you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, they invested in your time, right? You invested in them, so you want to know what has been the possible outcome. But the one thing that struck me about what you said, Emily, was the flame of possibility, because I've also worked with individuals where perhaps they had people in their community, in their circle, that were actually helping us extinguish that flame of possibility. And so, yeah. So I'm curious, what would you say to those individuals that maybe they're getting those signals like,
Huge. Know who the people are that fan the flames to make them grow for you. And if you're continuously having an experience of feeling hopeless after interacting with someone or in an interaction with someone, call it, like, notice it for yourself and really monitor what it is that you're sharing. I've had coaches come to me and say, the only way to build a business is to coach other coaches, and I don't want to coach other coaches. And where are you hearing that? Where are you getting that message? And your job, your responsibility is to have boundaries in place. Sometimes I'll defer to Brene Brown's square squad concept. It's like this little square of people, only those people that really get to give you that the guidance and the advice that you're seeking. Because especially for those of us who are up to big things in the world, how could I possibly expect? Now, I'm lucky because I have a mom who's amazing, and if I tell her I'm going out and doing something she doesn't understand, she's going to support me 100%, and she has with this. But how could we possibly expect that our siblings, our friends who aren't in this work, or someone who hasn't built a business is going to how can we expect that they're going to be able to support us? I mean, aside from, we could ask them very specifically, here's what support looks like for me. And I actually did this with my mom, who's amazing, but had some doubts and concerns. My father had big doubts and concerns when I left a nice, a big paycheck in corporate. And I finally had to turn to him and say, here's what support looks like for me right now. Support looks like not your worries, but support rather looks like you reminding me of all of the amazing things I've accomplished in my life up to this point, Dad. That's and if you can't give that to me, I love you. I know you love me, but just let's not chat about it right now. That topic is off limits.
So appreciate you for saying that it can be so hard to create those boundaries. It takes so much emotional energy to be able to do that. And yet the reward is so, so important. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I want to share one more thing that about leveraging communities, and then I'd love maybe for you to talk about your book a little bit. My last piece of advice is, if you are an ICF member, maybe see if you can get involved in your ICF chapter. I think that's a wonderful, I know for the ICF NYC chapter, it's such a wonderful, wonderful and active chapter. This is how Maribel and I met, because I decided to volunteer for the chapter, and I have met incredible, incredible colleagues through that space. So that's a easy way to get involved in a coaches community that's incredibly rewarding. So Emily, would love for you to talk to us a little bit about, you mentioned doing big things in the world. So we'd love to hear about your book. Tell us how you got started. Tell us about it.
So I have 2 human babies, which I've been so fortunate to give birth to. And then I have a book baby, The New Golden Rule. This was an idea that came to me in 2019. Maybe it started spinning in 2018, but really came to me in 2019. And the idea was actually, a la Rich Litvin, is to write your second book, not your first book. So he said, you could write your first book, and there's a second book in you that's much more vulnerable and real. Write that one. So this book is really, I like to say, I explained it it's 3 different things. One, it's a story of my own journey, which I had the bumpy road journey. Like some people have that smooth road, really just freshly paved. Mine was like after many winter storms and the potholes and all of that. And that has actually been part of the resilience that I have learned throughout my life. So I talk about my own journey. I talk about the day my daughter was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome at the age of 5, and it hit me like a Mack truck. And I thought, this is it. I don't know if I can go on. And just my own story of transformation. So that's one part. The second part is my coaching methodology. And I want to be really clear here. I lay out a methodology, and it's one way of coaching. It is not the only way of coaching. And I have flexed and even gotten more creative in my approach since the time I wrote this book. And I believe I will continue to do that. So there's it's a framework that I believe is easy enough for someone to apply on their own. So I wanted the book to really be able to access people who couldn't necessarily afford or be in a space to have one-on-one coaching or even group coaching. And then the third part is client vignettes, because at the end of the day, I could tell my story, I could tell the process, but the reader wants to see themselves, and they may see themselves in my story, but likely they're going to see themselves in someone else's story. So the book has emotional intelligence woven through. I was a kid who had learning disabilities. They don't go away, by the way. You just adapt and adopt and all of that. Different, you adopt different ways of learning. But I remember throughout my life, though I had a high IQ, I was not performing in school. And my parents just kept telling me, you have so much emotional intelligence. And I don't even know how they knew that language back then, but they did, probably because my mom is quite well read. And she's like, but you have such high emotional intelligence. And I never really knew what that meant. It turns out it's true. And once that was part of what led me to the study of emotional intelligence. So with all of my coaching work, I weave in emotional intelligence. I think it's just, it's a simple enough concept, and it's a powerful one because it's made up of skills that can be built. So the book talks about some different areas of emotional intelligence.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Emily. We have 5 minutes to go. So I want to make sure that we have any last minute messages, anything that we haven't covered. Anything from either of you that you'd like to add before we go?
Well, I think in writing a book is such a tremendous endeavor, right? And I could see the self-doubt that many will go through. And then you mentioned the vulnerability, right? It's like, ooh, open it up. And I'm curious, how were you able to tap into the courage to really do it? Because that's the similar courage that many of the group coaches starting their practices will need to tap into, right? Their creativity, their vulnerability, and moving towards action. So I'm curious, what helped you break through?
Support, community. There were key people that supported me through the process of writing this book, and just tapping into those people. I worked with someone to help me on the writing. So I had a lot of the ideas, and I would write, but I couldn't quite express myself the way I wanted to. So I had someone who was in my community to support me with the actual hands-on writing piece. I had an editor, and we went back and forth many times. I had a group of coaches that at that point I was meeting with frequently to do some mentor coaching and co-coaching. And so my book was a big piece of that project. And having my own coach who could support me to get anchored into my commitment when my emotions wanted me to forget. Oh, you know what? Maybe I'll shelve this project. Maybe it's like, you made a commitment, right? Like, what do your emotions need? What needs to be released and moved through you so that you can continue to move forward?
That is fantastic.
And a lot of long days and long nights, and a lot of reading and a lot of research and a lot of stuff that isn't so sexy, and
doing the work. Oh, thank you so much, Emily. Thank you. I hope that this is part of what we provide for everyone who is starting their coaching practice, or even, to be honest, a lot of seasoned coaches who join us and want to revive their group coaching practice. So that was very inspiring, I think, for Maribel and I to keep knowing that this is one of the ways that we help everyone who joins us on this journey, both through these conversations and through the training, not just in the sessions. We are coming to the end of this conversation. Thank you so much, Emily. We so appreciate you for taking the time to be with us, for sharing your beautiful, beautiful self and all the advice, all your wisdom that you just shared with us. We'll make sure to follow up. In the chat, I have your details. We'll make sure to follow up in an email in a couple of weeks with the recording, as well as links to connect with you.
Can I just say one more thing before we wrap? Well, first of all, it's been wonderful to be with you this morning, and thank you. I want to just put a fine point on the vibration that we're all living in right now, the heartbreak that we're witnessing in Ukraine. And my heart is heavy and the pain is deep. And I know that others are feeling so much. This is a time that taking care of ourselves, like up the well-being. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. Make sure you're eating, the way your body needs to be fed, drinking plenty of water, getting your movement. You got to take care of yourself, because this is a long haul. We're in it for the long haul here. I don't mean what's going on in Ukraine. I mean the ups and the downs, right? If the past 3 years have taught us nothing else, we've got to be taking care of ourselves.
Beautiful words to end on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks everyone who's joined us.
Yeah.